When it comes to building arcade sticks, there are a couple of things you really want to consider. And one of the things that you will want to consider is what kind of parts do you want to work with? Most arcade stick enclosures tend to come in metal case enclosures. Some tend to opt for a wooden enclosure to try and like mitigate costs a little bit. But even then, the cost of going with a custom wooden enclosure or getting an all steel or aluminum enclosure can be a little bit too pricey for some. So what are some of the best alternatives for that? Well, one reasonable alternative is to go with 3D printed parts. And I feel like that's one thing that gets kind of overlooked in the arcade stick space. Just the relative ease of just being able to have parts 3D printed for you, or to have a 3D printed design and being able to actually make the parts yourself on demand. I just wanted to share some of my favorite 3D printed parts for your given arcade stick, whether they be things like enclosures to things like buttons and other associated accessories. So let's just go ahead and get started real quick. I feel like in the arcade stick space, if you're going to mention any brand or any individual regarding 3D printed arcade stick parts, the first person that you have to mention is Buttercade. So Buttercade is an arcade stick brand primarily run by one John Butterow, and I believe he also runs this with his family as well. For those of you who may or may not be familiar, Buttercade are the makers of one of my favorite FGC tools, these snap-outs. So basically the snap-outs, in case you are not familiar with, they are these little tools that you place over the top of your buttons. It's this little enclosure piece right here, and there's like a plunger cap on here. So what you do is that you put the little enclosure around your buttons, you put the cap on top, and then you just push. And once you push, the buttons come out easily. You don't have to worry about accidentally breaking the little snaps on the sides of your arcade stick buttons, which is a very easy thing to do and can absolutely ruin your buttons if you're not too careful about them. So these tools are always a pinnacle highlight to any arcade stick owner's toolkit. Like if you're playing on an arcade stick, a hitbox, a mix box, you will want one of these tools. Like absolutely. So here are my original 3D printed Buttercade snapouts. There's one for a 24mm button and one for a 30mm button. And these are entirely reusable, so you really only just need one of each. So yeah, so as mentioned, these are originally fully 3D printed tools, and for a 3D printed like two-piece set for like something that's supposed to like slide in and out of each other, these things work incredibly smoothly. The snapouts have since moved to this kind of more polished kind of design, kind of slowly stepping away from the old 3D printed days of the past. But these still work just as well and are still a pinnacle staple for any fighting game player's toolkit. Also, if you can find a 3D printed set of these, be sure to keep those. This is now a rare item because he doesn't 3D print these anymore. If you have a set of 3D printed snap out tools, hold on to those. Those are valuable. But this other tool that I also would want to mention is this quick disconnect removal tool. So as mentioned, like half of the pain of trying to remove buttons from your arcade stick has to do with accidentally breaking the snaps on the side of the buttons. The other half of the pain of removing arcade stick buttons is removing the quick disconnect wires from the button itself. So this tool comes really in handy for this. It slides on top of where the quick disconnect is, and then allows you to just kind of like pinch and then slide the button off. So you just slide the tool in place over the quick disconnect. There's like a little area here where you can pinch and get like a firm, solid grip on the quick disconnect without accidentally like bending it too much, and then you just slide it right off. Just comes off with ease. It's amazing how Buttercade just comes up with the most convenient tools imaginable to make arcade stick modding so much easier, and I feel like everyone is just sleeping on it. Like everyone is sleeping on this quick disconnect tool. People are coming around to the snap out tools. My man's not world famous yet, but my man should be world famous. You really should check this out, because regardless of the means through which this piece may be created, if it's 3D printed, if it's not 3D printed, this tool is more than worth the price. Like this quick disconnect removal tool and the snap out tools, more than worth the price. Think of how much money you will be saving on buttons if you have these two tools at your disposal. I guarantee you, in the long term, the money you are saving is much more than the price that he is charging. You want these tools. You want these tools. It goes without saying that Buttercade isn't the only person out there that's making 3D printed tools. It's pretty easy to take a given design and then go through and print it out yourself in a 3D printer. That's part of the appeal of having a 3D printer. So naturally, there are a couple of competitors in the 3D printed arcade stick part space that are also worth noting about. One of them is the creator of this little peripheral that you're seeing right here. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Odin. And the Odin is by far one of the best quick controller mods out there in the arcade stick modding space. As simply as you see here, if you wanted to try out the Mixbox style layout with the keyboard keys instead of the traditional joystick, all you have to do is remove your joystick from your build and put this little piece in. That's it. That is all there is to it. It is so ingenious, so incredible, so simple. If there was ever a way that you could go out and try to mess around with the Mixbox style layout yourself before buying a Mixbox, this is the way how you do it. This is the way how you do it. And what's even better, if you want to do it with the hitbox, there's a style for that too. This is the Loki. You can kind of see the thing thematically that layer shift is going for here. So the Loki basically is the Odin, but for a hitbox style input. You drop it. You drop this in where the joystick would usually be, and it allows you to play as if you were playing on a hitbox. The switches on both the Odin and the Loki are both mechanical switches. I believe these are Kali switches. As someone who has tested out these buttons, these little keycaps here for the directional buttons, if given the opportunity to have entire arcade sticks with these style of keycaps here on the Loki, I would not hesitate to do so. And the reason why I can make that statement is because I have tested them personally. What you're seeing right here are some of the beta-tested layer shift keycap buttons that layer shift had a select few arcade stick players test on just last year, and I got to try these out for myself. These are full-on arcade stick buttons. They aren't just the keycaps that you're seeing in this image right here. Like, these are full-on mechanical arcade stick buttons. So they have like the full casing and enclosure and everything. And I'm really surprised that these aren't like publicly for sale anywhere right now. I know that Layer Shift has a lot of products right now that are on a wait list right now. So if you want to order a Loki or if you want to order a Odin, those are currently on a wait list. But I don't think that these are. And that's something I would definitely have to go back and ask him about sometime in the future. If you guys want to see a little bit more about those mechanical buttons in the future, let me know in the comments below. And also make sure to DM Layer Shift on Twitter as well. He's layer_shift. So if you want to see those buttons for sale, bring it up to him. Bring it up to him. The Odin and the Loki are by far one of the greatest quick control swap methods out there in the Arcade 16 right now. So if you ever want to try out a hitbox style controller or try out a Mixbox style controller, definitely keep an eye out on the waitlist for the Odin and the Loki respectively. And lastly, I would be remiss if I did not mention the thing that really drew a lot of you guys in at the start of this discussion. And that would be the topic of 3D printed enclosures. Now, what you're seeing here is the Butterbox, which is a 3D printed arcade stick enclosure designed by the folks at Buttercade. This is a really small case. I was actually really surprised at the dimensions of this thing whenever I initially got it. This is just about as like minimal of dimensions you could probably expect from an all button style fight stick like the hitbox. The only thing that I've seen in my experience that's been smaller than this would probably be, say, the Snackbox Micro. This build was the very first 3D printed arcade stick enclosure that I've ever seen and that I have ever worked with. And to this day, it's currently the only 3D printed enclosure that I've worked with. Because Buttercade no longer actually prints these enclosures. This is actually one of the last ones. So if you wanted a 3D printed enclosure, what are your options? Well, I'm glad to say that during my research for this discussion, I found a 3D printed enclosure that is a near perfect replica of the hitbox. So I went out and I searched on Etsy, and there's a guy named, I will probably butcher this, Praetorian Printing, who has sold about 27 of these hitbox replica 3D printed cases, and apparently these match the hitbox dimensions to a T, to such an extent that you could even reuse the hitbox plexiglass. So if you were to go to, say, like Focus Attack and get a a custom plexi printed for a official revision of a hitbox, or get artwork cut for an official revision of the hitbox, you could very easily get the plexi, get the artwork, and then print this enclosure yourself to get a full-on hitbox. Now, the overall cost of what this would amount to relative to actually purchasing an official hitbox itself is something I personally would be interested in seeing. If you guys want to see a video of me actually doing that myself, I would be happy to. Just let me know. But this is incredibly accurate. It has all the supplementary buttons. It has what appears to be appropriate mounting screws for the PCB, and to make sure that you're able to print it in successfully in any printer, it also comes in two pieces that kind of slide together. And once you screw the top panel and everything on top of this, then it aligns perfectly and stays like perfectly intact. And if you wanted to try out this enclosure for yourself, you could just buy the files. The only thing between you and a fully printed arcade stick enclosure is $5. $5 is all that's standing between you and a 3D printed arcade stick controller. Mind you, you also have to consider the cost of the 3D printing material. You also have to find a 3D printer, which depending on where you're at, it may be a little bit more difficult to find one of those. Speaking specifically from my experience, I've been to college libraries that have 3D printers at them, so a 3D printer might be closer to your area than you may actually think. So try and see if you can find like an artist studio, or again, maybe try and find like a public or collegiate library, and you might just be able to find the means of building your next arcade stick, which is actually incredible. I will include the links to all of these products below, and I will also include links to each of these makers' Twitter profiles as well. If you guys want to check out more about 3D printed arcade stick enclosures, I did do an entire review on my Butterbox that I showed off earlier. So if you want to know what it's like to play on a 3D printed enclosure, be sure to check out this video right here. And thank you guys for watching.